One of the many perks I get in my job is that I get to meet amazing people every day. I have the privilege of gaining insight into what they're able to accomplish on an everyday basis and on many different levels. I often work to tweak or to optimize to add new tricks and tools, but I also learn a lot from every single conversation, whether that's with my students, my clients, my training buddies, and family members. So I asked some of them whether they would be okay with sharing their wisdom with more people, and the following podcast series is the result. Enjoy! Our very first guest on Weekend Warriors Rock is Brett. Brett is an entrepreneur and educator with many years' experience in coaching, leadership, and coaching leaders. I've had the pleasure to know Brett for the last 2 years, and we worked together on his master's at Academy EX. And during that time, I learned a little bit about his deep commitment to learning about what drives people to do the things differently from the norm and what allows them to keep at it, but also learning about himself and what works for him professionally and also personally. So perhaps he'll share some of this with us today. So please join me in welcoming Brett. Morena, Brett, how are you?
Morena, hi Sylvia, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you.
Very exciting to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit more about you, where you're from, where you've been, where you're based now?
I can indeed. So I'm currently based in Auckland, and at the moment I'm actually based on Waiheke Island in someone else's house, which is the amazing visual image behind me. I was originally born in Christchurch, been in Auckland for the last sort of 30 years, always worked in small to medium enterprises, predominantly in professional services. So as you said in your introduction, a lot of work around leadership and leadership development and looking at that within the context of organizations, but also over the last sort of decade or two, become much more interested in the wider sort of complexities of the organizational systems in which we operate, and then how leaders can be more effective and in their roles in those complex systems, which is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do the master's degree in technological futures that you mentioned, because obviously technology these days is having a massive influence on us all, and that's true of business as well. So I was really interested in learning more about the role that technology plays in that whole kind of social technology interface that all of us seem to be seeing a lot of potential in, but also experiencing the struggles that come along with it. So in a nutshell, that's where I am at the moment, where I've been.
Fantastic. And you're going to carry on with that work as well from the master's, I understand.
Yes, I am.
It'll be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a massive process, and even though we finished the study 4 months ago now, I'm still finding that every day there's just more new insights that I'm finding, and that's a blessing and a curse in some ways, because it means that there are lots of new ideas that are coming to the surface, but you get to that point, and I know that you've experienced this as well in your profession, that you get a bit overwhelmed by them all. Like, how many things can I tackle here?
Yeah,
and I'm sort of right in the midst of that now, actually. But that's cool. It's very exciting.
Yeah. No, I can definitely. I mean, through working together, see your excitement always, and the passion, and like I said, that commitment to learning. I think that's so awesome. Yeah. And is that the kind of stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning too, would you say?
Yeah, it is, which isn't all that hard when I'm living on a beautiful island like Waiheke Island. But yes, it is. It's absolutely, because I'm becoming more and more conscious of the fact that, technology seems to be every day just having such a massive impact on the way we think, the way we behave, and particularly, I guess, unfortunately, this whole era that we seem to be in of misinformation that is, seems to be pulsing through our, technology networks and communities. I mean, there's obviously a lot of brilliantly useful and helpful and knowledge that's being shared as well. But, the flip side to it is just we seem to be, in an environment where people can so easily get dragged down a rabbit hole because of what they read or hear through social media and through, online communities and things. And, some of that, of course, is incredibly useful in terms of people's own development and understanding themselves and their own, psychology and their own physiology and, who they are as a person and where they're going. But a lot of it, unfortunately, appears to be also, taking people in the wrong direction. So I've become more and more fascinated by that, and particularly around that whole area of self-development, because it does seem that with all the complexities we face in the world now, and there are so many things that are completely out of our control. The one thing we can control, of course, is how we respond to what's happening in the world. And to do that, I think, goes parallel with a self-development process and lifelong learning, so that we can actually navigate this complex world that we seem to be evolving into. So it is absolutely what gets me up in the morning. Yes.
I definitely got that feeling during the time working with you. Really appreciate it. You're always bringing other things to the table, new things. And that's one thing I really enjoy about teaching or supervision, if you can call it that, is I learn as much as the people I work with, I hope anyway, that you guys are taking something away. But you're always coming up with new, interesting stuff that I hadn't heard of. So all of that, and that commitment to learning, but also I guess that the demand of studying on top of everything else, and finding out a little bit more, or it's I guess a lifelong commitment again into self-development. What would be your top tips for looking after your body with all those pressures? What works for you?
I think I've long been kind of on this path of wanting to improve myself, and sometimes, I very often go down rabbit holes into new theories and trends and development, self-development. But I think what has emerged for me, probably most most profoundly during this master's degree, the study in the master's degree, and my work with you and your guidance. What's become more and more important to me is looking for work, concepts, ideas, knowledge that has a deep basis in science. So there's, it's underpinned by, really robust research, and the people that are, if I'm looking at, ways of being, working with my mental health, for example, as we know, particularly through technology now, there are so many apps and so many so-called experts. And, it became pretty clear to me that it's very easy to get drawn into them because the marketing of them can sometimes be very seductive. And, over the last couple of years, it became really obvious to me that, for me anyway, I wanted to make sure that anything that I contemplated, whether it was mental health or emotional or physiological or physical or, just day-to-day, work that would be improving my ability to, to live and live well. I wanted to make sure that it is based in some kind of a science-based, it was, had some sort of scientific basis to it. So that for me is the single biggest thing. And sort of doubling back to that conversation we were having before about technology and the amount of information that's flooding around our social media and networks and communities, that just as it's very thin. It isn't based in deep knowledge. So that's absolutely categorically the most important thing for me, that anything I want to, that I'm now engaging in the area of self-development, as it applies to my whole life, but in particular to my work and my project that I'm working on, I'm really, being very disciplined around understanding what's sitting underneath any ideas that I begin to work with or that I want to, put into my own development. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I mean, that's, I guess, why you're that interested in continuing on with study is just growing that evidence base. And I think I agree, and I've seen that a lot of what I would almost call predatory publishing or predatory applications out there that are literally preying on people's insecurity because no one's perfect. So I'm interested in that self-improvement. What does it look like for you? And have you come across anything where you say, I could really see the evidence base, and that really worked for me, and that, quite practically in that time of juggling study, family, work, and all of that. So anything specific that worked?
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of things. Probably the one that comes to mind first of all is, and actually you reminded me of it in the early part of my academic study, was the idea of, in plain language, I just refer to it as self-auditing, ongoing self-auditing, and the more technical term for that can be reflexivity, which is, another way of reflexivity simply means that, the capability to be able to look at our own subconscious biases, our own assumptions, our own expectations of, how we travel through life, and how often they are blind spots for us and they're unchecked. So one of the things I did through my project was engage in a daily reflexivity exercise of actually, as I was going through my project and looking at particularly at the decisions I was making, to try and continually stop and look at, okay, so if I'm making an important decision here about something, it could be to do with my project, it could be to do with the direction I'm going, it could be to do with, do I follow this person's advice or this person's advice, or do I listen to this research or that research? And just becoming really open to, are my own biases playing a role in here, and I want to go down that research route because actually that feels better to me, or, that might take me in the direction I think I want to go in. And really examining that process of, well, is this just a bias that I've got that's taking me in this way, and how objective is that? So that whole so for 3 months, I was doing that on a daily basis, and I've continued to do it since, not with the same degree of intensity at the moment because I needed a break from it. But that became really fundamental, I think, in my research to, very practical level, saying to myself, look, if I'm running a business, or anyone is running a business, how do we do that in a way that it can be sustainable and healthy over the long term if we're not interested in this process of self-observation, this process of self-auditing, and actually having some mechanism for looking at, the decisions we make and any biases and any blind spots and any assumptions we're making that are sitting underneath those decisions. And in my research, as you know, into small and medium enterprises, looking, here in New Zealand and globally, when you look at the challenges and the struggles that a lot of small to medium enterprises have, particularly, and startups is an excellent example of it. The long-term survival rate for SMEs and startups is extremely problematic. And I do think a lot of that is what you said before about there's so much content now that is coming from so-called experts that we can access through technology, that it just seems to be very easy to follow a certain direction based on something which is fundamentally not as objective as I think it could be. So it just seems really clear to me that, the ability to develop a business or to be an entrepreneur or to have a successful startup has to go well beyond just the subject that I want to work with, the technical subject that I want to work with. and it has to take a much broader perspective in terms of, what I'm doing. Where does this fit into? What impact might it have socially, technologically speaking, environmentally, economically, politically? And that's emerging for me as a pretty kind of a different way of looking at the world and looking at our existence in the world, both as an individual, an entrepreneur, or a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think that's something that I find increasingly, both in personal and professional life, is the clearer you are about your own direction, the clearer you can be about how everything else around that fits in, and when it fits in, and then making real strategic decisions and confidently saying yes or no to particular pathways,
Yes.
and doing that with commitment rather than being kind of all over the show and being
Yes.
taught here, there, and everywhere.
Yes.
I personally find quite hard because there's so much pressure, and I think particularly as someone who starts out in whatever it is, whether that's a new exercise routine or a new diet or say lifestyle, but also in terms of a business. You are torn into all these different directions, and actually being confident about what you're about allows you to make decisions there. So, have you got any particular experiences or scenarios in mind when you say, "Oh, things got really tough for me," say during the masters? And what helped you there? Was it that self-reflexivity? What did that look like, and did that help you?
Lots of examples, particularly I think in that last 3 to 6 months when we were working through our project, because I'd made a conscious decision by that point to make that journey, that last project phase of what we were doing, a very personal one. And what I mean by that is that I didn't want it just to be an academic process so that I could end up with a master's degree. I might have done that 30 years ago, but, I've got a bit wiser since then. So I wanted it to be a very personal journey. And by that, I mean, I wanted it to be something that I could develop that was really reflective of me, my experiences, my perspectives on the world, where I wanted to go. And what I learned pretty quickly in the process of doing that is that can be exhausting because it's very intense. So certainly the reflexivity process, in terms of looking at the quality of the decisions and choices I was making day to day, was an incredibly valuable process. The other was, I've also kind of learned a lot over recent years about, and I try to practice this as best I can, the mind and body, synergy, the way that that we're not, these are not separate entities. We don't have a body there and a mind there. We are part of a system. It all operates as a system. So I really wanted to make sure that on the one hand, the reflexivity practice was helping my kind of cognitive ability to make good decisions. But I also did a lot of work physically, just doing things like exercise, yoga, meditation was a very important daily practice. I'm one of those weird cold plunger people where I jump into ice baths and immerse myself into icy water at 4 degrees for longer than the human body should. But again, I've looked at the research behind that, and it's very young research. It's thin at the moment, but it's encouraging because it's beginning to point towards the relationship between cold water immersion and mental health, even sort of early signs that perhaps it's delaying, the onset of dementia in older populations and things like that. As I say, new science, but pretty robust as well. So, on a daily basis, I was, engaging in these physical and physiological exercises and routines that I know. I was quite disciplined around capturing the metrics of those as well. so that I could actually over time look back at them, because I find that if I don't do that, I can sort of look back and it all gets a bit vague and fuzzy. Well, I sort of think I've been doing that quite regularly, and my diet's been pretty good, I think, and I think I've been meditating, and I think I've been working out at the gym. I think it's all okay. But again, that's a bias for me to sort of be a bit loose around that. So I found the value in actually keeping metrics on a daily basis, simply from that perspective, be able to confidently look back at, okay, here I am today. I'm under pressure because we've got 3 weeks to get this project finished or whatever it might be. And yes, I am feeling, the pressure of that. But far more importantly, I know or at least I can confidently assume, if I can make an assumption if it's a conscious one, that the work that I've been doing over the last few months that's got me to this point has got me in a place where I think, as healthy as I possibly can be in order to be able to, produce the quality outputs that I want to, produce. So that was I think a really not surprising but not surprising, that just being able to sense and see that connection between that quite disciplined approach to development at mental, emotional, physical levels, and actually knowing that whatever I'm doing right now has got me in a good place to be doing this right now.
No, that's awesome. Any specific metrics that you keep, out of curiosity? Is it just about the practice and keeping on with it? So like cold plunge and meditation, tick, tick, tick. Or was there like a well-being kind of score that you gave yourself? Anything else?
Yeah, I didn't give myself a score, but I've continued on with it. But in a slightly different way now, that I did find in the process of looking back over all of that the time that I spent doing that it sort of started to become a bit mechanical in a way, a bit mechanistic in a way. It's sort of subjective, but it did feel like it was getting a bit mechanical. So I sort of took a break from it, but over the last few weeks, I've started to emerge back into it again. But I've been much more interested in adopting and we were talking about this earlier on before we started on this podcast, of looking at linear time versus circular time, which and circular time is what many Indigenous cultures work with. And a lovely metaphor I heard described by a woman in India, actually, who seems to be a very respected spokesperson on Indigenous time. And how it's treated as a circle rather than linear. And she used this lovely analogy. She said, in my culture, we often look at time as a pond. It's a pond. So, and in that pond, we can have today the things that we need to do. So it might be, I need to exercise today. I need to work today. I need to connect with some people in my family today. I need to work on this project today. I need to do this, this, and this. But she said, if the pond is time, each of these things are not linear. They're just things that are in the pond with me, and they're all sort of connected and interconnected. And depending on, as I go through a day, she talks about how it's, by becoming more intuitive and more in sync with how we feel at given points of the day, and actually understanding, that from an internal systems perspective, actually I feel like now I need to be working on this project at this time, rather than getting up at the beginning of the day and saying, okay, today's going to be a highly productive day. So between 9 and 10, I'm going to do this. Between 10 and 11, I'm going to do that. And it's all set out in that very Western way. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I can understand, and I'm beginning to see the value in taking a different perspective on it. So what I'm doing now throughout the course of a day is, rather than sort of setting goals for myself about the number of times I'm going to meditate or the number of times I'm going to, take time out to do a reflexivity observation on myself, I'm actually just keeping it's literally a diagram of the things that I want to work on during the day. They're not linear. They're just little circles on a page. And as I do them, I just add a little stroke to them or a little mark to them. And that just is my way of saying, okay, I've done one of those today. I've done some of that today. I've done some of this today. And then at the end of the day, I can look at this. And again, it's not linear, but I can look at it. And there's a much more sort of a holistic impression of, okay, wow, here are these really important things that I wanted to work on and be doing today. Some are personal, some are professional. That's okay. They're all part of me. And I've kind of made little marks that only I would understand what the marks meant. And I'm just finding that to be a new, but a kind of a really interesting and a much more flexible way of working through a day, because, I've always sort of taken this view that I think probably many of us in Western society do, that, you get up in the morning and you eat, and then you get in your car and you drive to work, and between 9 and 10 you're going to be meetings, and you're going to do this, and then you drive home, and then you see the kids, and then you have dinner, and then you blah 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 blah. And I don't know, it just seems that is pretty kind of tiring, and it doesn't really connect into our sort of intuitive way of being. So I'm really experimenting with that at the moment, and making sure that I retain the discipline of keeping metrics, but just doing it in a very different way.
No, I love that analogy. And I always think of things that happen throughout my day, whether that's in a linear way or in a more like, oh, I feel like this, now I'm going into that, which is mostly weekends, I have to admit. During the week, not much space for that, of like the different areas and the ripples that they make. So that pond analogy really kind of resonates with me, because I'm thinking of ripples, say, of an awesome conversation like that we're having today, and the impact that will have on the rest of my day. So on the other stones in the pond, so to speak, how that's all interconnected. So that's a lovely analogy.
That's a great example.
If you've got a link to some of that work, that would be amazing.
Yes, of course I do.
The show notes.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about how the reflexivity and that new approach has kept you grounded and has kept things going really well. Inevitably, unfortunately, in life, things also go pear-shaped. So is there anything specific that you want to share where you say, that's what I do when things just go to rubbish? That's really worked for me in the past, that I'm happy to share for other people to try out for themselves.
Yeah, it's a very timely question, because I've actually over the last 24 hours been experimenting with that myself.
Great to hear.
So one of the people that I listen to quite regularly is a chap called Dr. Andrew Hubman. He's a well-known professor in neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford. And I find it fascinating simply because there are many areas that he calls them health protocols. The health protocols that he looks at as a neurobiologist, and essentially ways that we can understand more about ourselves and the things at a very practical level we can be doing as human beings in order to be able to be healthy and mentally, emotionally, and physically. So one of the concepts he talks about is, I think he termed this name non-sleep deep relaxation, NSDR, non-sleep deep relaxation, and which is a way of being able to, during the course of the day, when it can be used at many times during the day or night. It can actually be used in the middle of the night if we wake up and our mind's racing at 300 miles an hour, as mine is wont to do, and many is. As a very practical exercise to help to deregulate and calm down your system, and in order to help you to get back to sleep again. But it's also something that he talks about can be wonderfully useful if we are under pressure, like we've just had a really challenging conversation with somebody, at work, or a child or a parent or whatever it might be, and we're feeling stressed and anxious. So here's a 10-minute podcast, or a 10-minute. It's on YouTube actually, where he takes you through a 10-minute process of this non-sleep deep reflexivity, and I found that not deep reflexivity, non-sleep deep relaxation. And it's simply a way of being able to use, first of all, your breath in ways that engage our parasympathetic nervous system just to calm us down. And part of it is a visualization process. And over the course of 10 minutes, I did this literally yesterday afternoon after something I'd been experiencing was kind of causing some stress. And literally after 10 minutes, I found myself, as he talks about, in this state of relaxation, not tiredness, not like sleepy, but just having allowed my entire system to relax and my mind to relax, and to then be able to move to the next thing that I wanted to do or needed to do in a way that there was much more clarity and much more objectivity, and just not going into something else with, the stress, with, the mind chatter that so often we have that can take us off into different directions and make us feel in ways that are not useful for the next thing we're going to be doing. So that's it's a very practical one. And what I like about Andrew Huberman is that, given his scientific knowledge, is that he's very much talks about his work in ways that, yes, the science sitting underneath it. His role is not to teach us the science, but to give us tools and techniques and specific practical approaches that we can actually use as health protocols, which I really love that. So I'm just starting to follow his work, finding it immensely valuable.
Nice. Oh, that sounds like an awesome strategy. I think anyone can pick up, because, who doesn't have 10 minutes?
Exactly.
You can get those back easily if you carried on down that track. And worried you would be less productive and effective and whatever else stowing within the pond that you choose to work on next.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. So we talked about when things are getting tough. How do you celebrate when things go well? Anything you want to share there?
I'm very simple from that. I'm very simple from that point of view. I will do things like just go outside into nature. I'm looking after a beautiful golden Labrador here at my Waiheke resort, and I'm usually around animals, dogs and goats and cats and whatever. So for me, just to be able to take the dog down to the beach and walk down the beach, for me, is a lovely way of celebrating something. Equally, it's a lovely way of being able to respond to something which has been more challenging.
Yeah.
I am very conscious, I think, as it is for many people, of the things that go well, of actually sort of taking those for granted and not celebrating them. Dwell over the things that don't go so well, but when things do go well, you just kind of, that's good, and you move on to the next thing. So sometimes it might just be a few minutes of just sitting quietly and just reflecting on it, just even where I am, just consciously stopping, not letting myself go on to the next thing, but just reflecting on, that decision that I made, 3 days ago or 3 months ago or 3 years ago, what I'm experiencing or what I've just experienced is either a direct or an indirect result of that. And it's a pretty cool thing, not gloating over it, not being, not letting pride and vanity. It's not about that. It's acknowledging and really appreciating the work that you're doing as an individual that can allow you to get to that point where things go well.
Relate.
I'm glad you asked that, because it's such an important and overlooked feature of humanity, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's that daily gratitude, whether that's for things that you've achieved or things that you're lucky just to be part of, without any direct achievement per se. I think is a really important thing, like you say, often forgotten.
Mm.
And then not to say go down the gloating path, but what would you say is your biggest achievement to date?
Oh, why didn't you warn me about this one? Um, that's a really good question. Having two amazing children
Oh.
has to be my, I think what I don't even want to say proud of, but it's just there's something very special about bringing new life into the world. Perhaps that is the most fundamental achievement we can, as a human being, procreate. And so I'm immensely grateful for the fact that I've had the experience in my life to be able to, have two people that I can call my children and continue to watch them grow. And in one case, they now have their own children, and to watch that process of, generation after generation, I find that immensely rewarding as a human being. And I think the other, from a more personal point of view, just having got to where I am now, I mean, I'm in my mid-60s, where a lot of people...
Really? No.
Yes, stop it. Stop it. Where and I see this in friends that I've known all my life that are in that same generation. We're kind of moving now into that slowing down in life, sort of getting to their end of their careers, and they've, haven't got a mortgage, and the kids have left, and they're sort of playing golf, and which is fantastic. That's a lovely way to be able to kind of be right now. For me, I'm the opposite end. I've seemed to be at a point now where age just is completely irrelevant. I'm really blessed that for some reason, I do not know why, for some reason, I feel like I'm starting something completely new again. And I'm looking now, I find myself looking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. Who knows if I'll live that long? I really don't care. But I'm looking, at this project that I'm working on, and just become so excited that at this stage of my life, I'm actually, working on something completely new, something which is long-term, something that I hope will have value to others and to contribute. And I envisage how I'll see my days out, which, is pretty kind of special,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, oh, totally. And I think that's what, it's a lot of people that have had the pleasure to work with, is just, that commitment to learning and throwing yourself at new things, and being grateful for what you're part of. I think I really appreciated working with you in particular as well. And all the cool and awesome stuff that you keep digging up and sharing. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, there's more.
Thank you for sharing the pond and the NSDR stuff, and also, your journey with the daily reflexivity journaling. I think that's some really cool practical tools that people can take away, and that's why exactly this podcast exists. So anything else that you want to share before we wrap up for today?
No, I just, I think that just this conversation, which is 30 or 40 minutes, once we finish talking, I'm going to now, I've reminded myself to, take some moments of gratitude, because these kind of conversations I find, because you and I are, are very much on the same wavelength on this, we know that. I find these conversations in and of themselves incredibly insightful, and they are enormously rewarding at so many levels. For me personally, and I hope for others that will listen to the work that you're doing and these conversations that you're having. And it sort of reminds me that it's so easy to go through the day or to go through our work lives or our personal lives without having these kinds of conversations, of stopping and actually connecting with people who, have a shared view of the world, and just to be able to discuss that and talk about that, I just find incredibly rich and rewarding. So, a massive thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for being part of the journey. It's exciting. And I look forward to catching up on Thursday to celebrate your graduation of your master's.
Yes.
And yeah.
For those that are listening, the end of my master's, where I arrived at, could only have happened with the input of Sylvia.
Oh no!
I would have got to the end. I would have got to the end, but I know that I would have got to a place. I know that I would not have got to the same place that I got to.
No, I think that's too kind. I think you could have taken it away with anyone. I think there was some special magic, and I think that's why I invited you to join me today. I think, like we say, we're on the same wavelength and see some things quite similarly. So I think that made it maybe faster, I would say, perhaps.
There we go.
It's not about speed either, is it? It's not lifelong learning.
Yeah, no.
You've definitely got that commitment. So thank you so much for joining me.
My absolute pleasure, Sylvia.
And I wish you a fantastic start to the week. And
thank you, you too. Brilliant.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, click like on YouTube and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Apple or Spotify. Weekend Warriors Rock.